Our last session is using learning science to guide the development of engaging, accessible, and inclusive content. Presented by Lisa Peterson from TopHat.
To start, I really just want to start by thanking TAA for allowing me to come and present today. And in particular, I'd like to thank Kim and Kylie and Sierra and Trisha for organizing what I think has been a really stellar experience. And I also really have to say thank you, Paul, for your last presentation and for representing your journey so well. And in particular, just underscoring the challenges inherent in having to rethink what is a print piece for the digital space. It takes work and it takes some thought. So I will touch on actually some of that during my presentation. So again, thank you for being a wonderful advocate for that. So using learning science to guide the development of engaging, accessible, and inclusive content. So I'm actually going to start with a little bit about myself and TopHat as a bio, my bio and just a little bit about TopHat. But as I do that, I have on the screen something for you to think about, which is one of TopHat's guiding principles for content development, which is in order to build effective content that addresses a learner's needs, we need to be intentional about what we are building and how we are building it. So this is just something to reflect on as I tell you just a little bit about myself and TopHat, and I promise there is context for this. So I have actually been in the textbook publishing space for 21 years. I am currently the Director of Content Development at TopHat, development and production actually. So I manage the team of individuals who work with textbook authors such as yourselves. So my team consists of project managers, developmental editors, production managers, and copy editors. So all of the book team people that Paul spoke a little bit about. I am Canadian, so I worked for most of my career at Nelson Education in Canada. I also spent several years working at Oxford University Press, Canada. Also worked freelance. And I really am just one of those people who came up through the publishing industry, starting as an editorial assistant. Some of my first jobs were, preparing invoices for freelancers, getting coffee for meetings, like really literally the traditional stuff that you've heard about. And I've seen a lot of change over those 21 years in the publishing industry. Probably one of the most frequent things that I heard, particularly as we started getting into the 2010s, was talking about the digital space. And, is my book going to be digital? What is better? Is print better? Is digital better? And when are professors going to be ready to move to digital? So in answering that question and thinking about it, I'm not really sure to some degree that it matters to say what is better or what is not better. What really counts in the textbook space, whether it's digital or print, is that you are solving someone's teaching and learning challenges. So until you create something that someone wants to use, people won't be ready to go to it, whether it's print or digital. So that really is sort of underscoring the intentionality of what you are doing. So then, just moving to TopHat. TopHat is a company that offers a courseware platform, and it was initially developed in 2012, really just as an interactive engagement tool. So think of iClickers, for example. So that's really where TopHat started. And then it built an authoring platform similar to the one that Paul is using. Or has used for his textbooks, which is very similar to any word processor, and giving professors the ability to create their own content for the classroom. And that could be anything just from a quiz, just a tool for attendance, putting their PowerPoints in, anything like right up to a very robust textbook. Then in about 2017, TopHat moved into the ground-up textbook space. So 2017 is when TopHat first started thinking about textbook publishing. So prior to that, courseware engagement platform. We had 6 books, I think, in that first space. Stephen Buckles, who is here with us today, hello, is one of our early textbook authors from that ground-up space. And shortly after that, TopHat started acquiring publishers. Morton being one of them, Fountainhead Press, Blue Door, which is a lab company, Nelson Education, which is the Canadian company, and most recently Active Chemistry. And so as a part of that, I joined TopHat in 2020, even though the company that I worked for was acquired. TopHat only acquired the content, they didn't acquire people. So I actually willingly moved over from a legacy print publishing world into the TopHat digital space, which was a very exciting change for me. And we spent probably the early part of while I was there ingesting books. And my remit in particular, as I joined TopHat, was to really help bring some of the legacy best practices in developing content, pedagogically sound practices, just sort of the way we work with authors into a company that actually didn't have a lot of experience in that space. And so that's the area that I work in. So one thing that I will say is whether you are working for TopHat, whether you're working for McGraw-Hill or Peterson or self-publishing, I'm hoping that what you'll walk away with today is just a few tips on how you can use learning science to inform the way that you build your content and the intentionality with which you need to do that in order to make something that is going to address the key teaching and learning challenges that people in your field have in the classroom. All right, so that's the introduction, and I swear we will move along a little more quickly. Okay, so my agenda today. We're going to probably spend maybe about 10 minutes on, sorry, I am making funny noises here, aren't I? Is that okay? Okay. About 10 minutes talking about an overview of the learning science principles that underpin TopHat's content development process. 5 pillars of dynamic learning solutions, which is the framework that we use at TopHat for building our content in the platform. And then finally, the alignment of those principles to the 5 pillars for how we build our content, and then I'll take some questions. All right. Learning science. So number 1, an overview of the principles. So let's start with a definition of what learning science is. So it's an area of research that focuses on the study of teaching and learning. Everybody else seem to have a nice little pointer. May I? Oh, okay. May I borrow it? This is your own. Oh, okay. Well, learning for next time. Okay. There we go. Maybe I shouldn't bother because I'm not used to this. Okay, an interdisciplinary field that draws from cognitive science, psychology, and anthropology. And the goal is really to, I think I will put this down, I clearly can't do both. The goal is to facilitate learning in designed environments, and that's just a reference from the International, the Institute of Learning Science. So at TopHat, we have a learning scientist named Dr. Kevin Leung, and he's been very, very instrumental in helping translate the body of work from the learning science field to help us apply evidence-based practices to the solutions that we create. So also full disclosure, I am clearly not a learning scientist. That's not my strength. I'm also not a teacher. I'm not a practitioner, so I don't teach in the classroom. But what I do offer, again, is my longtime professional experience in publishing, and specifically, as I mentioned before, working with authors such as you to help bring structure, clarity, accessibility, and inclusivity to the content that you write. All right, so You're right about the nose thing when you have it too close. Okay, so these are the practices we're going to look at just for the next 10 minutes. That's not all of them. There are many, but these are the ones that most commonly inform the work that we do in our textbooks. So retrieval, space practice, elaboration, interleaving, concrete examples, dual coding, desirable difficulty and scaffolding, and metacognition. Okay. So, 3 things for each principle that we're going to look at. So as I go through each one of these 8 principles, we're going to look first at what is it? What are examples of it? And why does it work? So it's not going to take us long. What I will say is when we get to the examples, if you see any sort of gaps, if you're like, hey, I also do this, or there's something that you're missing there, feel free to shout it out. I don't mind. Okay. So retrieval practice, really what this is it's engaging students to actively recall and use new information on a regular cadence while they are learning. All right, these are some examples of what retrieval practice looks like for the student. So asking interwoven questions in a lecture with, either just, hey, what do you think? Or with classroom response tools. So again, as I've pointed out before, these can work for digital or print. Really, either is fine. Asking students to write a summary of what they've learned at the end of the class. So those are exit tickets. Or asking them to answer questions. So just quick show of hands, how many people in this room have used these techniques in the classroom? I'm going to guess most of you, right? Okay, so you're familiar with this and what it is. So why does it work? It strengthens connections to memory and leads to better long-term retention, in a nutshell. So really, retrieval practice is all about pulling information from students rather than trying to cram it into them. So just as a quick soundbite way to think about it. Okay, spaced practice. What's that? That's distributing learning over time into smaller chunks. So again, show of hands, think back to your student days. How many times did you cram for an exam? Right. All of us did. I did it. So really, this is about distributing your practice, distributing a student's practice over time. So studying for your Friday exam throughout the week. So spend 1 day on Sunday, 1 day on Monday, or 1 hour, I should say, on each of those days in order to learn your information. So actively engage with your materials on a regular cadence. Why it works? Obviously, minimizes the amount of forgetting. So I can think of all of the times that I was cramming for an exam. I want to remember one particular one, midnight to 4 in the morning, because the exam was at 9 o'clock. And yes, I crammed everything in, probably forgot everything that I learned almost immediately after. So space practice, that's something that is definitely student-driven, but in our platform, for example, and probably many of the digital platforms, there are ways to embed that within the tool. Elaboration, encouraging students to expand on new learnings and make connections between them with their prior knowledge and experience. So this is encouraging students to ask why and how something works, asking them to explain a concept to their peers, thinking about how new learnings apply to their own experiences. One thing that Paul mentioned or showed in his presentation was ACE, which is our AI tool, which so I think would say we can apply some of this to that, which is, students can ask ACE to help give them an example, help elaborate on something. So it's an opportunity for students to, look for examples that can apply to their own experience. And why it works. Connecting new learnings to what students already know can reduce their working memory load and lead to more efficient learning. Okay. That was elaboration. Just moving along here. Interleaving. So this is switching between topics and varying their order in order to interweave them while you're studying. So again, student-driven to some degree, but in any learning platform, you can also apply this. And again, I will show a little bit later how that applies to the TopHat practices for developing content. So it's varying the order of topics over multiple study sessions and comparing and contrasting ideas. Any others that anyone knows of where interleaving is concerned? It's okay if you don't. Okay, and why it works? It forces the brain to work hard to recall prior learning and determine which strategies or skills to use to solve them. Concrete examples, another extremely important one. So that's using concrete examples and relevant examples to understand more abstract and complex concepts. So this can be examples are asking students to create, verify their own examples, provide them with concrete examples on abstract ideas, and asking students to link between ideas and examples to articulate how the example applies to the idea. And then why it works. Solidifying meaning with existing knowledge facilitates memory encoding, and it enhances concept identification. Okay, we've got 2 principles left, or 3 actually, before we move on to our 5 pillars. So dual coding, this is combining words and visual aids to help students learn more effectively. So dual coding, I think every single textbook that you will ever find has dual coding. It's just, this is the more formalized way of describing it. So you solidify, combining words and visual aids to help students learn more effectively. So those are diagrams, flow charts, and infographics within your book. So you can also encourage students to produce their own visual aids of content in order to help them solidify their own knowledge. So this goes to not just what you create as a textbook author, but also what you can encourage your student to create for themselves. So visuospatial sketchpad, really that's just your visual memory, visual impression of the concept that you just learned. That's what you're holding in your head. And the phonological loop is really just that immediate repeated practice. So if you're trying to learn a phone number and you're constantly repeating it in your head before you use it, that's what phonological loop is in that example. So big words for easy concepts that you all instinctively know. So what that does, why dual coding works, is it reduces cognitive load and boosts retention and understanding. Desirable difficulty, that's engaging learners with effortful, focused activities, challenging but not impossible, and then also scaffolding your assessments within your book, within your classroom, so that you're pushing students to always be at the edge of their mastery, the edge of the skills that they have. So again, spacing, interweaving, and retrieval practice are all key examples of desired difficulty. Providing support, but then walking your support back as students start to master their content, and ordering questions or tasks by progressively difficult levels. So, for example, moving up the Bloom's scale is one way that you might accomplish this. And leads to more efficient, transferable learning. Metacognition, one of our favorites, thinking about your own thinking. So this is reflecting on your own knowledge and using that to guide your own next steps in learning. So I think that probably we've all used metacognition in the classroom. This can be using exit tickets, but it can also be accessing prior knowledge that a student has to a topic, asking them to make predictions about a topic, or asking them about their muddiest point. So I think we have a lot of examples just generally that we all practice in the classroom. for metacognition. And it helps accurately guide behaviors about what, when, and how students learn. Wonderful. Okay, so I'm going to move on next, unless anybody has any questions. Okay, so I'm going to move to the 5 pillars of dynamic digital learning solutions. So I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation that one of my remits when I joined TopHat was to help bring some of the formalized practices from the legacy publishing world to TopHat, a company that was new in the digital space. So why formalize our approach to instructional design? Well, I offer you this. And this is what the TopHat page looks like for any new first-time author when they enter, if they've never written content before. So I would just love to have you, I don't have an eye clicker here, but please just throw out 1 or 2 words of how this makes you feel. Excited? Oh, maybe, okay, wow. Those weren't the words I was expecting, but I love it. But any other words? Confused. That's a great one. In control. Okay, that's interesting. I love that. Confused, excited, in control. Pressure. Okay, that's a really big one. So I think that, anybody else before I move on? Relaxed, really?
Because there's not a lot of clutter happening.
Okay.
Yeah, it's inviting.
It's inviting. Okay. Wow, this is all unexpected, but I can work with it. So it's all good. So I'm actually really happy to hear that a lot of you are excited by the white blank space. I sometimes forget that I'm talking to writers, people who like to write, and the nice fresh white notebook. But what I will say about this, we have 3 different teams at TopHat: our national textbook team, our custom team, and our onboarding team. So those are 3 very different groups of people using the platform. And all of them had very different practices for how they were going to build content in the platform. Our national authors and national arm is definitely much more structured. There are certain pedagogical practices that you apply to any textbook. Custom authors might not have that, and we were really trying to solve not just for our national textbook authors, but also our custom authors who may have never written a textbook in their life. It's not something that you instinctively know how to do, I would say. Maybe some people do, but we were trying to basically solve for that. And so really what we did was formalize how we were going to build content into the 5 pillars of dynamic learning solutions. So what I will say is this framework it's not proprietary, it's not groundbreaking science here. It is a framework, and every single publisher that you work with, whether digital or legacy print, is going to have some sort of framework like this to help guide how you develop content. So I'm going to walk through each of these pillars one at a time, just to give you an overview of how we think of them and how we build our content. And then after that, as I mentioned, I'm going to walk you through how the learning science underpins these pillars. Okay. So objective aligned content is really exactly what you see here. It is a 1-to-1 correlation between your A head up there on the left. So I think you saw this in Paul's presentation. For those of you who were here, that's the content tree on the left. That's really the table of contents. Every single one of those headings outlined in purple is an A head in a textbook, and the ones below it are your B heads. And really every single one of those A heads is simply aligned to a learning objective. So that really is objective aligned content. So what is the value of objective aligned content? So for an author who's writing a textbook, it really helps strengthen the offering and giving it structure. It really provides a learning path for your students through the content so that there is, some logical progression and flow. And I'll just offer you this, which is another way of thinking of objective aligned content. So there are 4 questions that you can really ask yourself when you are building the outline of your textbook. So first of all, course outcomes. This thing is, sorry. What will your students be able to do upon completion of a course? And I would say that there's a secondary question to ask yourself in that first tier of course outcomes. What are the problems you are trying to solve with your content, right? What are the key teaching and learning challenges that your students have? Following that, you build your learning objectives to respond to that first question. So how will the learning objectives help students achieve the course outcome up above? So then all of the content within that learning objective, how is that going to support the successful completion of each objective? So, for example, and then assessments at the bottom. Do the assessments test an understanding of the content? So it's sort of backwards design here is what we're really talking about. If you can't write an assessment for your objective, then your objective is probably not robust enough, right? So that's really the value of objective aligned content. Intentional interactions. I don't have the reference for who founded this original piece of research, but again, it's another common one, not just in the digital space, but in any sort of engagement that you have in the classroom or with your textbook. So intentional interactions, as it says up there, these are touch points that foster active learning to improve instructor insights. There are 3, student to student, student to instructor, and student to content. So in a digital space, you have a little more opportunity in some cases for that particular, for each of these, but at TopHat in particular, student to content is something where there's a lot more interactivity and a lot more opportunities for students to engage with the content. Again, thinking back to Paul's presentation where students can move and manipulate and look at interactives of the content in a way that they normally or may not have had before. There are more opportunities for that, but it doesn't mean those opportunities don't exist in print. So they still, of course, and in the classroom, student to student, that can be done in a digital space, that can be done in a classroom space. Accessible content. At TopHat, that is something that we take very, very seriously. It's actually something that's very, very close to my heart, in particular, accessible content. So I grew up with blind parents, and having to sort of translate the print world for them growing up was a big thing for me. And so having content that can be accessible for all users is so important. And one of the things, Paul, again, I hope you don't mind me keep constantly calling back to you. One thing that you talked about in your book is writing alt text. So alt text being for blind or partially sighted viewers so that they can have the same experience as the sighted user. For all videos, as Paul mentioned, we have closed captioning, but we also write descriptive transcripts of key concepts, key things that are visual only within the video that somebody might need for really truly understanding that. So very important to me. And this actually is just an example here of one of the many things that we do. We have 8 buckets of accessibility that we consider as we create accessible content. This is actually a visual that can work for somebody who is colorblind. So if you had red-green color blindness, I believe, this could actually be very challenging for you to understand if color blindness is a challenge for you. So ensuring that you, for example, on your graph have circles or diamonds or squares or arrows in order to differentiate between the content, that is extremely important. Inclusive design, again, another extremely important area that TopHat is really trying to ensure is strengthened in all of our offerings, is making sure that the content is reflective of all users. Research shows that students learn so much better when they are reflected in the content, when they feel that the content is something that speaks to them. So this is just an example. You know, previously this piece of text might have just said a recent study was one of the first published tests of bat fruit coevolution. Well, in this case, really important to mention the two doctors who were involved in that, the two female doctors who might be underrepresented in the field. And so that's just, you know, one of many examples of building inclusivity into content. I'm just going to take a drink of water here for a moment. Wow, I don't know how people do this all the time. Yeah, okay. How many people actively teach in the classroom? It's not easy. Like, show of hands, who teaches? How many of you have done a 3-hour class? Okay, well, hands off to you because... Does it? Okay. All right, well, I will practice that. As you can tell, I don't do this a lot, but... Okay.
Students talk a lot.
Yeah.
Activities.
Right, very important. Frequent assessment and feedback. Again, that's for us strategically integrating formative and summative assessments throughout our content in order to, you know, give students practice, but also graded assessments at the end. So this again is just an example of what that looks like in our platform. Paul mentioned that it's a single column vertical scroll. So basically we interleave those assessments within the platform. Feedback, hints, and explanations built into the platform. Okay, so we're almost at the end. Alignment of learning science principles to the 5 pillars. So this is me bringing it all together for us. So we talked earlier about the 8 principles that basically mainly apply to our platform. So the first 3, actually 4, space practice, retrieval practice, elaboration, and desirable difficulties. Those particular pieces of learning science inform where you put your assessments within your text. Desirable difficulty, again, concrete examples and dual coding. That informs the presentation of the material, what it's going to look like. And then elaboration and metacognition informs how we enable student studying and learning. Oh, sure. Do you need to take, yeah? Yeah, I can share this after, and the deck also has loads and loads of references and links that you can use if you want. So I'm happy to offer that up. And this is just another. This is basically how each of the learning science principles aligns to our pillars. So now I'm just going to go through each pillar one by one and just show you an example of what that looks like. Actually, not one by one, some of them are squished together. Okay, so the first one here is really an example of dual coding and what that looks like in a platform. So again, it's learning science, but it's also not rocket science, right? So again, I think it, as we mentioned before, dual coding is really just about having two information presented in 2 different ways. So Okay, I'm just looking here. So this particular example is actually something that I'm not particularly familiar with. The action potential of a neuron is presented visually as a snapshot of the key stages. So it's going through the key stages of the action potential, but that is really just a reinforcement of the content that is presented in here. Okay, so I'm going to stop now and ask a multiple choice question, and we will understand why I'm doing that in just 1 second. So show of hands, which of the following is not a mischaracterization of Ben Affleck and Jennifer Lopez? Okay. Oh, they're all, sorry, no, that's my mistake. They should be ABC. Never mind. Okay, that really should say A, B, C, and D. Oh, this is awesome. Okay. All right, so which is correct? A, the first, the second, the third, or the fourth? You were correct, actually. None of the above is correct. Okay. Which one is not a mischaracterization? Yeah. So this is actually fabulous. What I'm hearing in the classroom or this room here is the amount of work that you've had to do to figure out the correct answer, not barring the fact that I put the wrong letters up there. So, whoops. Okay. So what I want to do is break down why this is an issue and how learning science actually helps correct that. So one thing, the very first thing that's a very big issue with that question that you saw is the double negative. Which of the following is not a mischaracterization? Dependency on prior celebrity knowledge. Inclusivity, right? None of the above. That option actually doesn't assess any knowledge for students. So this really speaks a lot to the two pillars of accessible content and inclusive design. So at TopHat in particular, we actually have very, very robust guidelines on how we build our multiple choice questions. There are probably 36 individual different things that we consider when building those questions. And we now have an AI tool to help write multiple choice questions, but we have embedded our best practices for writing multiple choice questions directly into that tool. And that tool, of course, like Paul said earlier, doesn't pull from the internet, it just stays within your content. But basically what this accomplishes by not having double negatives, dependency on prior knowledge or none of the above, it allows you to create what's called a psychometrically valid assessment. That's in the learning science field how it's referred to. But it also ensures that it is inclusive and that it doesn't depend on you being somebody who understands who Jennifer Lopez and Ben Affleck are. Yeah?
A lot of you already know this, but I came to find out that when students read the answers first, like literally put their hand over the question,
Yeah.
they do much, much better.
Do they really?
Are y'all familiar with that? Yeah. I tell my students that they're all juniors and seniors in college, and they notice, oh my God, what a difference. And they all say, I wish someone told me that in first grade.
Really?
Like just looking at the answers,
Yeah.
you can almost anticipate what the right answer is going to be. And then when you look up at what the question is, your mind is not all jumbled up. It's dramatic.
That's interesting.
To read the answers first.
Because you wouldn't have to consider two things.
Okay, and I'm going to move to our final pillar now. which is frequent assessment and feedback. So within our platform, and again, this is something that you can do within any digital platform. Maybe not as easy in the print space, depends on how your book is built. But really what we're talking about here is space practice, retrieval practice, and desirable difficulty. So this shows you how you can apply each within our platform or many other digital spaces. So again, you can have progression of difficulty. So scaffolded learning, right? So as you move through the content, you increase the level of difficulty of each of the assessments. There's also interleaving here. So placing the content within the, placing the questions within the content, right? So you read a little and then you do a little practice. And frequent low stakes assessment. And again, I mentioned desirable difficulty as well. Yeah.
I ask this because there are a lot of College Board tests now that are doing that. So on the front end, the low stakes questions are there, I guess. So it's really a test of stamina. But also I think it increases confidence so the students don't give up so easily.
Yeah.
At the very beginning, they don't bomb out, but at least they can kind of increase their confidence. So that's what I'm asking. Is that a way to do that to get them to kind of hang in there for the?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, especially when you're talking about, when we talk about low stakes, frequent low stakes assessment, right? That is about building confidence. That is about being a little bit lower on the blooms, if that's the framework that you subscribe to, and increasing level of difficulty and level of confidence as you go. So really, just to sum it up, some of those learning science principles, objective aligned content and intentional interactions really help students understand the content better. Students feel more included and experience fewer barriers, that should say fewer, with accessible and inclusive design. And then students learn better and feel more motivated when they have frequent low stakes assessments. So I'll open it up to questions now, if anybody has any.
I would say that. I would say that too. I'm a school librarian. You only see that like at graphic novels, maybe.
Yeah.
That's about it. There are some adult graphic novels, but graphic novels are pretty popular for people who are intimidated by a lot of text. So the white space and the imagery and the illustrations kind of complement the text in a way. And you can actually do rigor with graphic novels, but I don't want to read graphic novels. I mean, I just order them because the kids, and you have some pretty hard hitting. There's a lot of nonfiction out with graphic novels to help kids grapple with complex ideas. Absolutely. Graphic novels in physics, chemistry. I buy graphic novels specifically for the kids. For all of that.
I spoke to a woman today, and I'm not sure if she is in the room, and I can't recall where she is, but she wrote, she applied examples from Harry Potter to learning law in 99. Karen Morris. Karen, are you here? So again, it's learning about some basic principles of law, but using Harry Potter. So started with an opening vignette, that describes the situation, then the law, and then how it applies, like how Harry Potter applied or misapplied the law. And so that's again what you're speaking to. It's helping somebody comprehend the content in a more accessible way. I love that. When I worked at Oxford, we developed graphic novels of Shakespeare at 3 different skill levels. So those that still use the language as it was written by Shakespeare, then there was a mid-level approach, and then the in plain English approach. So,
I was also going to say that I like what you pointed out about making integrating different ways to make it more inclusive. I've served on, and this is only for pre-K to 12, served on several textbook committees. And that's the one thing that when I listen to teachers, to have the textbooks be inclusive, and have an online platform that can seamlessly be integrated into an LMS that they're using. So that really works for them. And at first they thought that they would have resistance, but the students actually love that. Like if I could look at a graph and
Yeah.
I can zoom in, or if you can take me to a documentary,
Yeah.
or you can take me to a primary source, like an original diary, and I'm
Yeah.
actually looking at it, and and I can enlarge the text and interact with it. So I feel like it's been a hit, and these are things that
Yeah.
a lot of teachers are looking for. And having, there's one textbook company, they have these interviews with students who are giving them feedback on what they read. It's actually in the platform.
Really?
Yeah. It's in the platform. They're interviewing the students to say, how do you think about this topic that was it was a weighty topic. And the
Yeah.
students are doing like a fishbowl
Yeah.
feedback, like of what's been happening. So these are and like high school students, but it's amazing the
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
feedback that they get. It really informs them. So the next time they think about creating something,
Yeah.
and some of them do better than others. Some, of course, textbooks do it better than others, but I was amazed,
Yeah.
like what you can do with it. So.
Well, yeah, and not just TopHat, but many digital platforms, right? As you say, there are many out there that allow you to adapt the content as you need to serve your needs, right? So when you can take something and make it meaningful for the classroom that you have, because this national textbooks are written for a national audience, right? So to be able to customize it to reflect the users in your classroom, and as you say, bring in like real live resources, diaries, etc. It's fabulous. Hi.
So I don't know if this is really a question, but I keep thinking back, I don't know if you said this, Paul, or whether you shared this, that 80%, the survey
Yeah.
showed 80% preferred or
Yeah.
using their phones.
At TopHat. So I'm not
At
sure if that's
TopHat.
globally, but at TopHat we have user evidence to support them.
So-
80% uses it on their phones.
For me, just thinking it through, the adaptability to phone versus computer,
Yeah.
and you lose size, you lose,
Yeah.
depth, you lose all kinds of things. So either the technology has to adapt to be more amenable to phones,
Yeah.
or it's just, it's interesting. And, the scrolling
Yeah.
versus the side to side,
yeah.
and, all those kind of issues. And some of the functionality too, like you were showing the over the glossary thing. I mean, it's just, so it's not a question, it's more like, oh, man.
An observation. Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
you have
But
to
like this conference, I didn't bring a laptop because I thought, oh, I can do whatever I need on my
On
phone.
my phone,
And so I'm assuming that's, so.
well,
But I can't do everything I need to do on my phone.
yeah. But I think you make a really good point, and it also speaks to, and I had a conversation with, I can't remember who, again today, I spoke to so many people, but about the, in your print book, you made a very, very specific choice about why you laid something out in a certain way. Was that, yes, it was in your, right? The table, right? There's a reason why it's set up that way. So when you have to transform it to a digital space, and when that digital space is also going to be either computer or tablet or phone, then what are the considerations that you have to make about that particular piece in order to translate it to that new medium? Is it going to work for each one? What is the give and take? And there, I think you underscored it so well, Paul, that there is a give and take. You gain some things, but you also lose some things. And I don't think that's going to change, right? That unless, again, we get another real massive leap in technology, but it's about the choices that you have to make. And I would say moving into a digital space takes it takes work and it takes thought, bringing us back to the intentionality that I shared at the beginning. You have to be really thoughtful and think a lot about what is going to change and why is it going to change. If there are no more questions, I'll just say thank you.